round one, group 193.
And it seems like a surprisingly diverse group, too.
Oh, absolutely. It forces a cold, hard, critical call. Because when you put 4 wildly different albums side by side...
And listen to them again and again.
Yeah, like maybe 4 or 5 times in a row, all those minor flaws, the tracks you might usually skip, they suddenly get magnified. You can't ignore them.
Because you're grading completely different genres, different eras, against this single standard metric of quality.
Yeah.
Whatever that means in this context.
Pretty much. And Group 193, it really was a perfect storm of different. Just look at the contenders here.
Okay, so we had Queen's Foundational Rock Collection, Greatest Hits, Volume 1.
Mm-hmm. Classic.
Then Rod Stewart's 2013 album, Time. Much later work, more reflective.
Right.
Then Eurythmics' Be Yourself Tonight.
Yeah.
Mid-'80s, that sharp pop rock sound.
Iconic 80s, yeah.
And finally, the Academy's Almost Here. That's a 2005 American emo punk debut.
Talk about diverse.
Seriously, if you wanted to design a group to make critics, pull their hair out, this would be it. Just a brutal, brilliant mix.
Definitely sets the stage for some tough calls.
Okay, so let's start with the methodology itself and how it immediately kind of dictates the results. Especially this idea of an album unit.
Right.
Because framing it as a World Cup, it suggests that consistency and depth should be, really important. Paramount, even.
Theoretically, yeah.
But then the eventual winner of this group, Group 193, it almost challenges that whole premise, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, what's fascinating is that the structure inherently tries to push aside just, nostalgic affection. It forces this repeatable quality comparison.
Right.
But then, bam, you run straight into the brick wall that is Queen's Greatest Hits, Volume 1. The source material, the blog, calls this a majestic collection of Queen's finest early work. And, in a contest against 3 regular studio albums, putting a greatest hits compilation in the mix, it feels less like a competition and more like, an immediate coronation for that album.
Okay, I have to challenge that, though, just based on the idea of the album quest. If the goal is really finding the best album of all time, doesn't including a greatest hits package kind of fundamentally break the rules, or at least bend them? An album, traditionally, it's a snapshot, right? An artist's creativity at a specific moment.
That's the usual definition, yeah.
A compilation, though, it's cherry-picked perfection. It's designed specifically to avoid those dips in quality that most studio albums have.
That's a totally fair challenge. But the blogger, Greensterox, they sort of implicitly defend this choice just by the ranking itself. Well, they're basically arguing that this greatest hits compilation, because it's such an undeniable, almost flawless collection of work, it actually constitutes a superior overall album unit than maybe any single studio effort could.
So curated perfection outweighs single-era cohesion in this view.
That seems to be the assertion, yeah. The sheer strength of the material is just too high to ignore, even if it's compiled.
And you really can't deny that strength, can you? We're not talking about just some casual best-of CD you pick up at a petrol station.
No, not at all. This is a cultural cornerstone. It's got tracks that are just globally recognized anthems.
Absolutely. Give us some examples from the source.
Okay, well, let's just run down a few of the inclusions that pretty much instantly guarantee its dominance in this group. You've got Freddie Mercury's, 6-minute opera rock masterpiece, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Still amazing.
Still defies genre, even 50 years later. Then you've got the stadium anthems that go way beyond sports, like We Are the Champions. And then you dive into maybe more specific fan favorites, but still huge, like the bombastic soundtrack theme Flash, and that absolute masterclass in groovy, funky bass line. Another one, Bites the Dust.
Just hit after hit after hit.
Relentless. And even if you set aside the subjective quality, which is sky high, the objective context is actual success. It's staggering. And the source has made sure to include that.
Yeah, and this is a really crucial point. It elevates this particular entry beyond just, oh, I like Queen. This album is factually the UK's best-selling album ever.
Ever. Wow.
Over 6 million copies sold in the UK alone. And furthermore, the blogger noted that Queen's Greatest Hits 2, the sequel compilation, is also in the top 10 best-selling UK albums.
That's incredible market dominance. It's just deeply ingrained, isn't it, in the culture, the collective musical consciousness?
Absolutely. So when you have a subjective ranking system like this, but it meets an objective cultural behemoth like Queen's Greatest Hits,
the result is pretty much predetermined. It seems like it. The source material's conclusion that Queen was storming through in first place, it felt like a non-event, almost.
it just sails through to round 2. Not necessarily because it perfectly fits the album as cohesive unit idea of the World Cup, but because its quality, whether you call it cohesive or compiled, is just utterly unquestionable.
Right. It sets this impossibly high standard for the other three albums right from the start.
So the takeaway for you, the listener here, seems to be that when searching for the best of all time, this particular quest, or at least this reviewer, they clearly allow external factors like cultural weight and historical impact to contribute significantly to the score.
Especially when the quality of the individual tracks is just relentlessly, consistently high like it is with Queen. They establish the benchmark for progression immediately.
Okay, so if Queen's success was almost given like a philosophical asterisk on the whole methodology, then figuring out who came in fourth and why, that tells us everything about the minimum standard for quality in this album quest. What doesn't make the cut?
Right, the entry-level requirement, basically. And that dubious honor of fourth place, meaning immediate elimination, that fell to the Academy's 2005 debut, Almost Here.
Okay, so prime American emo punk territory.
Exactly, a genre that really lives and dies by its specific aesthetic and that, youthful angst kind of thing.
And apparently, the moment the blogger started listening, the review hit an immediate comparison point, an unavoidable one.
Yeah, the source material specifically describes hearing those opening notes and the voice of the singer, William Beckett, and the instant, inescapable thought was Panic at the Disco.
Wow, okay. Not just a similar vibe then.
No, it sounds like it was a nearly identical sound-alike feeling, both in the production style and the vocal delivery.
Interesting. And the review connected the dots there.
It did. And this is where we have to get into a bit of the technical background, the industry stuff. The source material linked this instant familiarity to the specific record label.
Ah, yeah.
Both bands, The Academy Is and Panic at the Disco, stemmed from Fueled by Ramen.
Right. That makes sense. That label had a very distinct sound in the mid-2000s.
It totally explains the shared aesthetic, yeah. But maybe more importantly, it explains the specific, very highly polished production tendencies of that whole mid-2000s emo pop punk era.
Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah.
What does highly polished production actually mean for emo punk in 2005?
Well, it generally means maximizing clarity and layering, even within a loud genre. You're often dealing with quite heavily compressed instruments.
So everything cuts through.
Exactly. Ensuring every snare hit, every guitar riff is crystal clear, even if there's a lot of distortion going on. And you often hear a heavy reliance on layered vocals, harmonies, giving this kind of digital bright sheen to the sound.
Making it sound immediately radio ready, I suppose.
That's pretty much the goal, yeah. That's the sonic template that Panic at the Disco rode to massive success. And it seems the Academy was kind of inescapably trapped within that same sound, even if their musical ideas were maybe a bit different underneath.
But the specific critique against Almost Here wasn't just the similarity, was it? It was that the Academy was less quirky.
Yeah, that was a key point. They apparently didn't have the same maybe lyrical gymnastics or the kind of theatrical ambition you heard in the Panic songs.
Yeah.
And crucially, the overall quality of the Almost Here album itself was criticized because it seemed to come in waves.
Inconsistency, the
Yeah.
killer in this format.
Exactly. In that direct back-to-back listening environment, inconsistency is fatal. The World Cup structure just demands that every track gets analyzed relative to what came before and what comes after.
So even if parts were good.
Right. The blogger noted that while the album was generally enjoyable, only a couple of tracks really stood out as, quote, half decent, specifically mentioning the phrase that pays and down and out.
And the rest.
The rest, those waves of inconsistent quality, they just didn't have the staying power, apparently. Or maybe not enough of a distinct sound needed to really compete with the other three albums in this very tough group.
So, reading between the lines, the implied critique is that the filler tracks on Almost Here were just too formulaic, stuck too close to that polished emo template without enough unique personality.
Seems like it. The high points just weren't high enough or frequent enough to carry the average tracks.
Right.
So even if it's an enjoyable, well-produced debut, which it might well be on its own,
Well,
it gets easily brushed aside when it's up against, peak compilation like Queen or the later career consistency we'll get to.
so the ultimate takeaway for Almost Here was pretty blunt. Evidently not up to the standard of the other three albums.
Which is why it landed in fourth place, eliminated.
Okay. So for you, the listener, this sets the absolute minimum bar for quality in this quest. If your album has noticeable dips, moments where the quality drops off,
And those become really apparent under repeated scrutiny.
you're instantly out, no
Yeah.
matter how good the good parts are.
Why?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then. Because Queen is securely in first, the Academy is out in fourth. We are left with this brutal, high-stakes fight for that crucial second-place spot. The spot that guarantees progression to round 2.
This was the absolute critical duel of the group.
Between Rod Stewart's 2013 album Time and Eurythmics' mid-'80s powerhouse, Be Yourself Tonight.
And it really becomes a battle of consistency versus iconic peaks, doesn't it?
Totally. You've got the reflective quality of this seasoned veteran, Rod Stewart, against the just undeniable hit-making brilliance of a truly decade-defining pop act, Eurythmics.
Let's look at Rod Stewart first. Time, released in 2013. It's very much the work of an artist looking back.
Yeah, the sources noted that clear thematic focus. Stewart laments youth, loves lost and family memories. The whole tone feels mature, contemplative.
Right, and what's fascinating here, reading the review, is the sort of bias the blogger had to consciously overcome.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a clear reference to that label of old man music, which, let's be honest, Rod Stewart's later work can sometimes carry.
Yeah, fair point.
Yet the album itself, Time, seemed to successfully defy that categorization. The reviewer actually called it a rather lovely body of work.
So what helped it overcome that potential bias?
Well, the production quality was highlighted as a major factor in its success in the Quest's ranking.
Okay.
The blogger called it a high-production album and noted that even with Stewart's voice having settled into that more gruff texture in his later years.
Yeah, it definitely changed.
It was still deemed a joy to listen to. And crucially, the songs themselves were described as very strong and more catchy than I would have anticipated.
Ah, catchiness. That helps fight the easy listening stereotype.
Absolutely. And the review specifically delves into how it managed to avoid that trap.
How?
Well, it acknowledged the easy listening vibe was present on some tracks, like Brighton Beach and Picture in a Frame, ballad territory.
Right.
But the album skillfully balances this with clear, up-tempo moments. The review cited She Makes Me Happy and Finest Woman as examples.
So there's a dynamic tension there. It's not just all slow reflection.
Exactly. And this is where the personality of the reviewer kind of intrudes on the source material in a really interesting way.
How so?
They felt they had to include this quirky, almost self-conscious comment about being able to easily dance around the living room to these up-tempo tracks.
Real?
Yeah, before immediately backtracking and assuring the reader that he himself would never actually do such a thing, of course.
Okay, that's quite funny. What does that tell us, though?
Well, I think it underscores two things. One, the reviewer is very aware of that potential old man music bias, maybe even feels it himself slightly. And two, the music's genuine catchiness and energy were surprising enough, strong enough, to actually override that bias and register highly in this comparative ranking.
So consistency, combined with unexpected catchiness, was proving to be this surprising powerful asset for Rod Stewart.
Exactly. He's making this late career argument for cohesive, high-quality consistency, and it's forcing the reviewer to kind of reevaluate his initial genre prejudices.
Okay, so that's Rod Stewart making a strong case. Now, let's flip to Contender B, Eurythmics, Be Yourself Tonight. This feels like an album built on just explosive peaks.
Totally different beast. This mid-'80s album, it represents a massive, quite strategic shift for Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart.
How so?
Well, they deliberately moved away from their earlier stuff, which was more experimental, that arty pop experimental sound the review mentions.
Right, stuff like Sweet Dreams.
Yeah, still huge, but different. With Be Yourself Tonight, they aggressively reestablished themselves as one of the definitive, sharp pop rock acts of the mid-'80s. Much more direct.
And the strength here isn't that quiet consistency we saw with Rod Stewart. It's just raw, explosive hit power, isn't it?
Absolutely. The source material confirms this single album contains 4 of their most well-known, most enduring tracks. Huge hits.
Which ones?
Okay, you've got the driving rock of Would I Lie to You. Then the sublime, almost ethereal There Must Be an Angel, Playing With My Heart, with Stevie Wonder's harmonica.
Beautiful track.
Then the big collaboration, Sisters Doing It For Themselves, and the comeback reassurance of It's All Right, Baby's Coming Back.
Wow, that's a powerhouse lineup on one record.
It's a sensational, very commercially minded blend of pop and rock that, as the review notes, incorporates the significant dollop of Motown influence.
Ah, that's interesting, the Motown element.
Yeah, I think that's a key structural detail. They weren't just making standard 80s synth pop here. They were consciously injecting these classic soul and R&B elements into their sharp synthesizer sound.
Broadening the appeal.
Broadening the appeal, creating undeniable energy. This album is a real historical marker, of how music was evolving in the mid-'80s.
Okay, so we have this Eurythmics album with 4 iconic, historically significant singles, almost flawless peaks, you could argue, pitted directly against Rod Stewart's album, which offers maybe superior consistency across its entire track list, but fewer of those absolute knockout moments.
This is the crunch point. This is the moment where the specific rules of this album crest methodology, the back-to-back listening, really become the executioner.
How do you weigh 4 masterpieces against a dozen, maybe very strong, cohesive tracks? It's a tough call.
A very tough call.
So what was the deciding factor, according to the source?
It came down to exactly that metric we've been discussing. Consistency. Rod Stewart won 2nd place. Eurythmics was ranked 3rd.
Wow. So Eurythmics eliminated, despite those hits.
Eliminated. Now, I have to say, reading this, you could argue against this decision, right? Based purely on impact.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it arguably more valuable in a grand scheme of music history to have 3 or 4 tracks of undeniable historical genius that people remember forever, even if the rest are just okay fillers? Isn't that better than a dozen tracks that are maybe just very strong, but perhaps less memorable in the long run?
In a traditional listening context, or thinking about cultural impact, absolutely, you could make that case strongly. But the methodology here, the Quest's methodology, is the key. The core argument the blogger used was brutally simple and ruthlessly effective in this specific Quest environment. The quality on Rod Stewart's time was, quote, a lot more consistent.
Okay.
The Eurythmics album, despite those phenomenal singles, suffered because, and this is crucial, in the required back-to-back, side-by-side comparison.
Yeah.
The in-between the singles tracks don't grab you as hard as those singles.
It's the filler tracks or the less remarkable tracks that ultimately kill the album in this format.
Pretty much. The structure of the Quest, that forced repeated listening, it just magnifies those dips in quality, those moments where it's just not hitting the same heights.
So the moment you're comparing, say, Time's solid thematic track 9 against Eurythmics track 9, which is maybe noticeably weaker than Would I Lie to You, that's where Eurythmics loses ground dramatically.
Exactly. And it's important to note both albums were apparently deemed expertly engineered, so we're not talking about, bad production on the Eurythmics deep cuts.
Right. It wasn't a technical failing.
No. The difference in perceived quality between the peaks and valleys was just more pronounced. And that critique of sustained quality, of track consistency, became the decisive, critical factor.
So the methodology itself, by forcing the reviewer to treat the album as this unbroken, repeatable experience, it ended up rewarding Rod Stewart's disciplined coherence over Eurythmics' reliance on spectacular but maybe less evenly spread peaks.
That's precisely it.
Okay. So for you, the listener, the big takeaway here is that in the world of serious music ranking, especially in a competitive Quest environment like this one, the quality curve across the album is often valued more highly than the singular height of the peaks. An album that maintains, say, a steady 8/10 rating across all its tracks might actually defeat an album that swings wildly from a 10/10 masterpiece to a 6/10 filler track.
Consistency is king in this specific game. And actually, before we fully move on from Eurythmics, their track listing offers one incredibly sharp data point, a specific moment we absolutely have to zero in on.
Oh, yeah.
Because it perfectly illustrates that inherent risk you take when you achieve a really spectacular peak. It involves the track sisters are doing it for themselves.
Ah, yes, the source material really focused on this one. The monumental duet featuring the undisputed queen of soul, Aretha Franklin.
Exactly. And this is where the critique in the review gets truly unexpectedly harsh. But it provides remarkable analytical depth because of it.
What did it say?
The blogger observed that Annie Lennox, despite having, and the review acknowledges this, a fantastic voice and a fantastic range.
Which nobody would deny. She's incredible.
Right. But Lennox was, quote, somehow made to look ordinary next to Aretha Franklin.
Ordinary Annie Lennox.
Ugh.
Wow. That's a staggering statement. That's a critique that lands like a punch, doesn't it?
It really does. It just highlights the sheer unique gravitational pull of a once-in-a-generation vocal talent like Aretha Franklin.
It's less a knock on Lennox, maybe, and more just a reflection of Aretha's almost superhuman dominance.
I think that's how the reviewer intended it, yeah. But it raises this vital question that the blogger then speculated on.
Which was?
Was Annie Lennox fully aware of the risk involved in collaborating with such a rare talent? Was she conscious that putting her own undeniably fantastic talent right next to Franklin's could unintentionally highlight a difference in, say, raw power or maybe vocal technique?
Or was her self-belief just so overwhelmingly strong that she thought, no, this collaboration will only elevate the track, elevate both of us?
Exactly. It's a fascinating dilemma in musical risk-taking, isn't it?
Definitely. You achieve this spectacular peak, this powerhouse duet that everyone remembers, everyone cites as a highlight of the album.
An undeniable 10-10 moment.
But in that very moment, the comparison becomes incredibly stark.
Yeah.
You're measuring yourself or being measured against an almost impossible standard.
Right. The blogger wasn't really judging the overall quality of the song itself. It's a classic. They were judging Lennox's performance relative to the legend singing right next to her.
Okay, so how does this specific anecdote connect back to the bigger picture, to why Eurythmics lost out to Rod Stewart?
Well, if we connect this micro-anecdote back to that macro-ranking decision, it illustrates precisely why the Eurythmics album struggled with the consistency criteria.
How so?
Moments of spectacular, undeniable genius like having a duet with Aretha Franklin, they create an incredibly high peak on the album's quality graph.
Sets the bar very high.
Extremely high. But if the rest of the album, even the other three amazing singles like Would I Lie to You, they cannot maintain that same relative height compared to the Aretha track.
The perceived overall quality, the average, drops sharply in comparison.
Exactly. The bar is set too high by the collaboration itself. So the very brilliance of that specific peak, the genius move of including a legend like Aretha, may have, somewhat ironically, actually contributed to the overall consistency critique that ultimately got Be Yourself Tonight eliminated from the quest.
That's a fascinating paradox.
It really is, and it's a fantastic analytical lens for you, the listener, to consider when thinking about albums. When does a big collaboration create an unforgettable genius moment? And when might it inadvertently expose a relative weakness that a really rigid ranking system like this one will inevitably punish?
Food for thought, definitely. Yeah. Okay, let's wrap this up then. Let's quickly review the final results of Group 193 for this album quest, and maybe synthesize what these specific decisions tell us about the methodology Greenstock seems to be applying across the board in this whole project.
All right, let's recap. The official final rankings for Group 193, according to the source material, were: number 1, Queen, with Greatest Hits, Volume 1. Progression pretty much guaranteed by that overwhelming peak quality and its massive cultural weight.
Made it through easily.
Number 2, Rod Stewart, with Time. Progression secured because of its consistent, disciplined, thematic quality right across the track list.
The consistency went.
Number 3, Eurythmics, Be Yourself Tonight. Eliminated. The reliance on that handful of massive hits wasn't enough. The perceived quality dips in the deep cuts hurt it in this format.
The peaks weren't enough to save it.
And number 4, the Academy is almost here. Eliminated due to, well, general inconsistency and maybe sticking too close to that genre template. Didn't meet the baseline standard.
Did make the cut. Okay. So what does this specific outcome, this ranking, tell us about the fundamental criteria for success in this particular album quest context? If you want to progress, what do you need?
Well, it suggests a pretty clear hierarchy, or at least 2 distinct paths to success in round 1.
Okay.
It seems you must either offer just relentless, overwhelming, broad quality, what we sort of termed the super album phenomenon with Queen's Greatest Hits.
Path 1, be undeniable.
Right. Or path 2. You must demonstrate thorough, consistent, cohesive quality throughout your entire track list. And that's what elevated Rod Stewart's Time into 2nd place.
Be consistently very good all the way through.
Exactly. And that crucial fight for 2nd place really proved the point, didn't it? The consistent album, Time, even the one that carried that initial whiff of old man music bias, it ultimately defeated the album built on that handful of extremely high-quality, iconic singles.
Eurythmics just couldn't withstand the scrutiny of its deep cuts, especially when directly compared back-to-back. And the Aretha comparison maybe didn't help either.
Seems like it. So this establishes a pretty clear role, or at least a strong tendency, for the rest of this quest. Sustained, repeatable engagement seems to be prioritized by this methodology.
Right.
The system actively punishes structural dependence on just your biggest hits. If those tracks in between the singles fail to grab the reviewer under that intense, repeated listening, the album is deemed structurally weaker relative to the competition.
Regardless of how influential or beloved those big hits actually were historically.
Apparently so. It's a fascinating, almost cold-blooded rule when you think about it.
Yeah. You can be one of the defining sharp pop rock acts of the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
You can have 4 genuine generation-defining anthems on your record. But if those deep cuts don't perform consistently under this specific microscope, you're out of the running for the title of best album of all time, at least according to this quest.
Which brings us to one final important question, a provocative thought maybe for you, the listener, to consider as you digest this whole analysis of the source material.
What is it?
If the ultimate goal here is truly to find the single best album of all time, should consistency across deep cuts, across the entire album experience, be weighted so fundamentally higher than the singular, undeniable brilliance of a handful of iconic, history-making tracks?
Is the overall product's steady quality curve ultimately more important than those peak moments of genius that often define our relationship with music history?
Exactly. It's really the core tension of any kind of music ranking exercise, isn't it? And it seems like it's the very engine driving this entire ambitious album quest forward. Where do you fall in that debate?